Hello, this is Fred Hooper, Lead Visual Effects Artist at NVIDIA. This is part 2 of the Intro to Cascade. Now in this video, we're going to be covering the basics of the Emitters, Details, and Curve Editor tabs. Now in the Emitters tab is where you're going to be spending most of your time, as this is where you set your materials and behaviors, layering emitters to create a whole particle system. I'm going to be jumping between the Emitters and Details tab, as the Details tab will change based on anything that you select here. Now this could be a particle system, emitter, or a module class. To select the whole particle system, you click in this blank area here, and in the Details tab, you're going to be getting some options here, like for your system update, LODs, bounds, particle system delays, things like that. Whereas if you select on an emitter class, you're going to be getting like your emitter name and modes and renders and things. Whereas a module will change based on what you have selected. So like your initial size will give you size options in the Details panel, whereas color over life will give you color over life options in the Details panel. So it all just depends on what you have selected here. Now the basic interface for the Emitters tab is you left click to select something, and then you right click to give you a context sensitive menu of some kind. So this would be for a module, whereas if you click on a module itself, it'll give you a handful of options here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show you how you can make an emitter in a pre-existing particle system. So there's 3 ways to do it. In this blank area, you can right click and you can add a new particle sprite emitter, and it'll give you a default emitter like we had in the other particle system we made in the last video. Another way you can do it is you can click on an emitter, right click, and go to particle system, and you can add a new emitter before or a new emitter after. Let's do one before because we've already got one after. So those are 3 ways you can create an emitter inside of a particle system. So let's delete this one, hit the delete key to delete that. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over what is in an emitter. So let's hit the solo key here just to look at this single emitter here. And the emitter column is the whole emitter. So you have, this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns in it. And this incorporates the look of the particle system itself. Now you have a enable disable key, and if you hit disable, you see this changes to like a noise pattern. I've already shown you the solo key. This will disable all of the other emitters. Before this was here, you had to disable each one by hand, and that was a bit slow. Now this middle button is your emitter render mode, and you have a number of different options here. Now the first one is your normal mode. Now this will show you what is being rendered as a regular particle. So right now this has the default particle on it. You can see it displayed there. If you click on it once, it will give you point mode. Now point mode is useful for if you want to use, if you want to see your particle system by itself as a particle, and then you can change like a behavior. I use this if I want to do a specific behavior on the actual particle itself, as well as your cross mode. Now the cross mode will show you the size of the particle, and will also scale if you have a size by life in it. If you click again, you'll get your lights only. Now if this is set up to be a light, it's just the mode you need to have set on for that. Then the last one is a do not spawn. So we're going to go back to the normal mode. Now over here you can see we also have this as a drop down, is your normal, point, cross, lights only, and none. And you can select any of those here to get the different render modes. And the last thing I want to bring in about the emitter block is you can double click on it to collapse it. And that's useful in case you have a really big emitter and you kind of want some space. You can double click some of these down to give yourself a little bit more room to work with. Next thing we're going to look at is the modules. Now the module define the look and behavior of the emitter. Now I'm not going to be going over each module in this video, but we're going to touch on some of them when we create a particle system in the next video. But I do want to go over some of the buttons here. So again, left click to select it to give you a context over in the details panel. But then you have a enable button here, disable rather, to turn off. In this case, it would be lifetime. And this button here will create a curve. So down in the curves editor, if I click on this color over life, you can see it created 2 of them there. But we're going to go over the curves editor tab in a little bit. Now, one thing you're going to need to know about modules too is that what type of emitter that you have will change the amount of modules you're going to get. So with a CPU emitter, you get this amount of options, whereas if you go to a GPU emitter, you're going to get a different set of options. Same thing with if you have a mesh emitter, ribbon, or a beam emitter, those options will change. But now that we're talking about modules, I want to talk a little bit about how to move them around. So I'm going to turn this back on, have the whole emitter going, and I'm going to disable this. And let's say I want to use this constant acceleration over in this, new particle system that I have. If I left click drag it by itself, it'll just move it. So this one loses the constant acceleration, this one gains it. I'm going to move that back. Now if I hold down Shift left mouse drag, I'm going to instance it, which means that this is going to be calculated at the same rate, at the same time, excuse me. And then if I were to change one of these modules, it'll change both of them. I'm going to delete that. And if I hold down Control drag, I create a duplicate. And if I wanted to change, if I want to change this to 600, then this one is okay. Delete that. If you need to move an emitter along the emitter tab, you can click on it and use your left and right arrow keys to move it around. And you can do that depending on what displays in your viewport. Now that we've gone over a little bit of the navigation and kind of talked a little bit about the modules and their buttons, let's look a little bit at some of the emitter contacts. So with an emitter selected, right click, and you can see with your emitter you get a drop down of, you can rename your emitter here, or you can also do it here. So we're just going to leave it called particle emitter. You can also duplicate your emitter or duplicate and share an emitter. Now what that does, a duplicate emitter just makes a copy. So let's go over to the smoke emitter and then hit duplicate emitter. You can see now we've got 2 smokes. So if I wanted to change the way that the smoke looked, I can do that here and it'll basically not touch this other one. And delete that. And it's going to give me a warning because of the LODs, and that's okay. Now if I were to duplicate and share the emitter, in essence what you're creating is an instance of the previous emitter. Now anything that I would change over here would also change my first smoke emitter or my second smoke emitter. If I change one of these, you can see that by color that they're linked together. Now let's say I wanted to change the initial size of this smoke, I would need to copy one of these down, holding your control drag, delete that, and then add in another, like 120. You can't really see it, but you can change that there. So I'm going to delete the second smoke again. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the delete emitter. You can just hit your delete key for that, or you can use the delete emitter here. And then last couple things on here are your exporting emitters. Now the way that you do that is a little bit of a process. So I'm going to set up a scenario. Let's say you're working on a bunch of emitters and you're like, oh, a bunch of particle systems, and you want to move, say, these flames into another particle system. You can't just right click copy it. There's no way to do that here. So what you need to do is you need to know a couple of things. The first thing you need to know is where do you want to export from, and the next one is where you want to export to. So I'm just going to close this just to be clear. So in this case, I want to use this pfire. So you open that first, and that says, okay, I want to use this emitter to export from. Now we need to get another emitter open. So let's go to the content, and open up the particle that we made in the last video. Now this second particle system is the particle system that we want to export to. So if you go into your fire, now this is ready to be used. and you can right click and say, okay, export an emitter. In this case, I want to export just the flames. So, okay, export the emitter. You can see that the flames are there. Now, if you want to export them all, you right click and you hit export all. And then all of them will be there. And that's the way you export an emitter. So the next thing we're going to look at is the particle systems. Now, we've already done the add emitter before and after. Selecting in a particle system is simple as left clicking. Now this remove duplicate modules. There are times when you create a particle system that you're going to need multiple modules of the same thing in the same emitter stack. So I actually tried using it to delete something the other day and it didn't work. So make sure you clean up your emitters as you go. And those are pretty much everything I wanted to go over with the emitters tab. So now we're going to go over the details tab. And this is a typical interface where you can left click on something and type as you need. But what I want to really look at here in this tab is the filters. So if you click this eyeball here, it'll drop down a set of filters and also a couple of actions you can do. But the main thing is like the show only modified properties. This is very useful for larger emitters. So like your required has a lot of options in it. And sometimes you're just digging for a handful of options, and it's really useful to say, okay, what did I change here? So put that filter on, and it's something that you can use for that, as well as these others here. Like hidden properties are your drop downs. Advanced detail are like some of your drop downs, which this one doesn't have it, but some of them do. The emitter does for sure. These are advanced things that generally you don't really need unless you need something specific. And then you have your collapse alls and your expand all categories. So it's just a way to quickly open up all of the drop downs or collapse all the drop downs in your details panel. Now the last thing we're going to look at are the curves. Now curves change a particle's value over time. Now the time is normalized from 0 to 1 to whatever time that you have in your lifetime settings. So if it's 3 seconds, the curve will change the particle's value over 3 seconds. If it's 2 seconds, it'll be 2 seconds, etc. This is an example of what a curve looks like. This is a color over life curve, so it's changing from white to like a red color. Now to navigate in here, with the pan button selected, you can left click to move left and right, up and down. And you use your middle mouse button to zoom in and out. Now I don't use the zoom button very much, but left mouse button will zoom in your vertical, and then right mouse will zoom in your horizontal. And your middle mouse button works the same as before, it'll zoom in and out. I generally keep it on the pan button just because it's easier. And I can use these horizontal and vertical fit buttons to fit whatever curve is selected here. So if I've got the alpha over life selected, I can hit fit and it'll fit only that curve in. If I have both selected, it'll do both of them. But it can get a little confusing, so you can turn them on and off here. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at these auto curve, these different curve keys. Now what this will do is, if you hit auto, it'll change your curve. Originally it was set to linear. You can change your curve keys to the different modes. So your auto key will give you a tangent that you can, or auto clamp will give you a tangent that you can use. Now the moment that you move this tangent, it will change it to a user key, which is pretty much automatic, and that's fine. Next thing is you can add a point here by selecting Control left click. And because I want to show you how breaks work, if I want to use a break, this is going to break my tangent, and it will move each side individually. Linear will make will basically set a straight line from point A to point B. Constant will keep a value until the next point and then drop it down to that one. Make this a break again. Flatten will reflatten your tangent. Straighten will basically take your tangent and make it use the curve range for that. And then show all will show all of your tangents and will not. One thing I needed to say here is that your distribution needs to be set to be using a constant curve or a uniform curve. I generally use constant curve because uniform curve can be a little funky. If you want to remove a curve, you select a curve here and you can hit remove curve or remove all curves. If I want to add another point here, I can right click and set time or a value or delete it, or set a color because this is a color over life. If I do the same thing with alpha over life, it'll only give me a time or value because this is a float. Now to delete a key, or to select a key, I can just left click select it, and delete it I can hit my delete key or use the right click menu. We've gone over some of the basic controls in the emitter, details, and curve tab in this video. In the next video, we're going to make a simple effect in Cascade. Thanks for watching.